So tensions and diplomacy continue to define the relationship between China and the United States as the two global giants try to balance trade and tack to regional security. Both sides are making strategic moves and holding high-level talks to manage the differences. China has now called on the U.S. to fully cancel its reciprocal tariffs following Washington's announcement of exemptions for consumer electronics and the key chip-making equipment. For more on what this all means, we are now joined by Donald MacKay, who's the CEO of XA Global Trade Advisors. Donald, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. One moment Trump makes an announcement, you blink and, geez, things have changed. Where are we currently between China and the United States?
Well, that's a good question. At the moment, we seem to have extremely high tariffs on both sides. President Trump has started granting exemptions to certain products, things like cell phones and some other electronic equipment. But ultimately, the tension remains between China and the US, with both of them currently having tariffs in excess of 100%. So very, very disruptive. But as to how that will change, one never knows.
Yeah, explain to us what this, first of all, means for the Americans, because the point that Trump has been stressing is that once you impose these tariffs on companies, or let's now focus on factories especially, let's make an example with an Apple. Once you do that, it would mean that you almost give an incentive to an Apple to say, bring your firms back into the United States where we will be able to create jobs. But Apple is arguing that the United States doesn't necessarily have all of the skills that are required in a more focused area where you have that opportunity in the United States, and it would cost trillions of dollars of rands to try and move those operations. What does it mean then for the American consumer?
Yeah, so the idea that you can simply relocate a factory is ridiculous. It takes years to set up a cell phone factory, for example. The supply chains run all over the world. You cannot simply relocate that to the US. Even if you could, you'd need to find enough engineers that are skilled in this particular space. The US has not been training those people, largely because there's been not that kind of demand. China, on the other hand, is training those people. So the complexity here is incredible. Also, if you wanted to do that, you need to keep the tariff in place. So if you're going to put the tariff in and take it away, the incentive to do a relocation is going to disappear. And given all of this, the more likely outcome is these products will simply rise in price in the US, certainly until the US actually gets those factories relocated, and that may never be.
Yeah. Then what does this all then mean for the South African citizen? These are both our two biggest trading partners, the United States as well as China. And we also know from a diplomatic perspective how the U.S. views China and how, on that basis as well, the U.S. views South Africa. But first of all, speak to us about what the trade war means for the country and for our citizens. Yeah.
Well, again, this is hard to predict because the President Trump keeps changing his mind on this. But assuming he imposes the 30% on South Africa 90 days from now, it would most definitely harm around 2/3 of our exports to the US. So the minerals we send are largely exempted, but the other stuff, cars, agricultural goods, wine, etc., would catch those tariffs. So that would certainly be very bad. We're also expecting to see an overflow from the trade war looking for a home. So, for example, China is not going to suddenly stop producing aluminium or steel or whatever it might be. That product is now going to have to find a space elsewhere in the world. So on some of those products, the prices will drop. If we have local manufacturers, they will struggle with that. So I would expect to see more anti-dumping cases being brought, more safeguard applications to protect the local industry. But on products we do not manufacture, of course, those prices will simply drop and will be a bonus for the consumer.
Yeah. And if China then starts looking for these new alternative markets, in the case of South Africa, we know, for instance, the concerns that have been raised when it comes to steel. How does the South African government then respond to that and trying to protect local markets at the same time as well?
Yeah, that's difficult. We're a very small economy in the middle of nowhere, making this quite a hard problem to solve. I think South Africa here needs to look very carefully at who its friends are. Europe, for example, very much wants to move closer to South Africa. So do many of the South American countries. We have to be able to create some heft by working as a group. I don't think BRICS is that grouping. It may become more popular over time, but BRICS comes with many political problems because of membership of countries like Iran and Russia in there. But, we should use the opportunity of the G20, I think, for this year to bring together other countries, invite them to South Africa, sit down, have these discussions to try to work out how we can set up alliances, how we can get other markets open for our products, and have an open conversation with countries like China so that we try to get to a position where China consumes more of its product locally and is not sending it everywhere else in the world to eat up their markets.
Yeah, and we know with wars as well, of course, there's the grim aspect of the war, but there are also opportunities, underlying opportunities that are always there. For South Africa, yes. What are those low-hanging fruits that we can look at and say that perhaps we should be exploring these? And we also know that we have the African continental free trade area. There are some issues there as well as it currently stands. But what are the low-hanging fruits for South Africa?
Yeah. So we must be very clear that this is more bad than it is good. But I think what it is doing is it's spurring us into action to say we need to reduce our dependency on the US as an export market. It is big, but it is not an enormous part of our GDP. But they've become an incredibly unpredictable trading partner. So absolutely, we need to bring some energy to the African agreement to try to get that over the line now. We need to look at the other agreements that we do have, such as Mercosur with South America, look at expanding that agreement so that we get access to those markets and can also bring in materials from those markets. But yeah, I think we've got to look at a map of the world and say, for the kind of stuff that we produce, which are the countries that buy that, and let's see how we can get closer to them.
Yeah, and finally, just quickly on Forex, with a stronger dollar, the impact that has on the rand, but on top of that, what about my savings as an individual and my pension funds? We know that, for instance, in the United States, there are already complaints that pension funds have been impacted. We know South African legislation allows for a certain portion of pension funds to be invested in foreign countries. What does it mean for those people whose contributions go to companies that have offshore investments as well, especially when it comes to pensions?
Yeah, so this is definitely not my area of expertise, but I would simply say this, that most of these investments are made with a long-term view, not just the short term. So the question is, how long do we have this frothy period where it's very unstable, and when does it settle down? I simply don't know, but I'm hoping that I've got to believe that there are many advisors to Trump who would desperately want to take down the temperature of this trade war. And I would think likewise in China. And if those two can kind of calm down a little bit, the rest of the world can figure out what to do. But, these are the world's two largest economies. If they are fighting, everyone suffers. So I think long-term investors would surely be understanding to look beyond the immediate. But beyond that, I can't say.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Donald MacKay is the CEO of XA Global Trade.